And I have one other question. I do what some people refer to as automatic writing, or I'm tuning into either my higher self or others, such as Abraham. Can I trust what I'm writing, or is it possible to be tuning into craziness? With what I write.
Well, the most important thing about that is we don't push your pencil. That's your grid filling in with impulse. And so Esther remembers actually feeling energy in her arms. So it felt like her hands were being manipulated, but that was just the energy moving and all part of her translation process. Mm-hmm. So we just wanted to say that first, that unless you are tuned to a frequency, you're not getting the impulse to write. And the most important thing that we want to say to you, even more important than the answer that you want us to give you that we are going to give you, but this is even more important, is that the more you trust it, then the better your connection will be, because you can't receive and be in doubt at the same moment. Your doubt blocks the flow, you see. So if we were standing in your physical shoes, we would never doubt the connection, but we might ask the question, am I up to speed right now? Esther does that every single day, especially on a day when she's going to see you. She wants to make sure that she is in the most receptive of modes. And everyone around her does their best to make sure that there aren't things that she's going to stumble over that might make it more difficult for her to be in that place of alignment, you see. Because the place of alignment is of paramount importance when you are translating, you see. But don't hold yourself to some standard. Esther asked us hundreds, maybe thousands of times, especially in the beginning. She hasn't been asking the question in years. But she would ask frequently, Abraham, am I receiving you clearly? And our answer was always yes. Always yes, even though there were times when she was receiving us more clearly than others. When Esther is really tuned in, it just flows. You can feel it. You can see it. You know it. If Esther is in some sort of aggravated place, and she can still receive us, but it's a bumpier ride for her, you see. So don't doubt it. Trust it. And the more you do it, the more you will trust it. Now, you ask a question, are you receiving some sort of craziness? Well, when your intention is to tune in to that high frequency, that pure positive energy frequency, if you're not, you'll feel it, you see. It's not something that you ever want to force. And in some ways, have you been listening to us for a while? And so have you followed our conversation about deliberate creation and the art of allowing? And have you heard us talking and writing books about when you ask, it is given, and about the vortex? And now you hear us talking about the grid. Well, this conversation about the grid, we are really excited to introduce that into the conversation, because that grid, when you allow the grid to fill in, that's this conversation about allowing the impulse to write is exactly the same conversation that we want to have with all of you about allowing anything that you want. You don't want to fill your own grid in. And sometimes people get into an idea that they're wanting to receive from infinite intelligence, and they force it rather than allowing it, you see. And when you do that, you can feel a tension in that. Mm-hmm. When your intent is to allow it and nothing's flowing, well, it only means you haven't focused a question into being. It doesn't mean that you're unworthy and not receiving. And if something isn't flowing, it means one of two things. Either you haven't focused a question into being, or you're not up to speed with the answer that you are seeking, you see. So it's always the same process. Are you following that? If anything you want isn't coming, it's always for one of two reasons. Either you haven't focused it into being enough, or you're not in a state right now of allowing what you've focused into being. And this brings us to a place that we really want to be relative to this conversation of deliberate creation. Because we talk about the three-step process. Contrast helps you to do step one, which is ask. Source answers, which is step two. The vortex and law of attraction, rounding up all those cooperative components. But your work really is step three. You must be in a place where you are allowing what you've asked for. So everything is really about that, getting to that place where you are allowing. So then sometimes you're confused. Well, where do I stand in this deliberate creation? Should I be setting goals? Should I be scripting? Should I be visualizing? What am I supposed to do about my creation? And we so want you to understand that most of what is to be done about your creation, you've already done. Most of it you've already done because you sorted through the contrast and you launched those rockets of desires and Source answered. So most of the doing that is to be done has already been done. So now your work is simpler than doing. It's more about allowing. But what do you do? What could you do? How can you allow? Abraham, you crazy ghost, how do I allow? How do I allow without doing? Isn't focusing doing? Well, it sort of kind of is, isn't it? So here's what we want you to hear. We've not been talking about this before, but it's right where we are in this leading edge conversation. So take it and play with it and enjoy it. When you deliberately think a thought with the intention of moving towards something you want, that's sort of determined, I'm thinking about this thought. Start again. Contrast caused you to put it in the vortex. It's done. Source already answered it, so it's done, 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 done. It's done, it's done, it's done, it's done. So the only question is, how are you going to get up to speed with what's done? Well, if talking about it makes you feel good, then that's getting you up to speed. If writing about it makes you feel good, then that's getting you up to speed. If imagining it and visualizing it makes you feel good, then that's getting you up to speed. So are you following us? That the majority of your work is simply for the reason of bringing yourself up to speed. Esther would say to Jerry all the time when they were driving, tell me a story. She just loved having him describe delicious things. Tell yourself stories. Tell yourself the way you want it to be. Envision it, yes, but speak about it right out loud. Talk about what you want. Isn't it nice? Don't I live in a wonderful environment? Isn't my world perfect? Aren't things always working out for me? Isn't it going to be fun when this fills in? Don't I love how the grid is filling in? In other words, use your words and use your focus, use your molding of the clay for the purpose of talking yourself into vibrational alignment with what you are wanting.